Good day. Today I'm going to show you how to draw a hyperbola. So first of all, we need to know the standard form of a hyperbola. So the standard form is f of x is equals to a over x minus p plus q. So this you have to memorize. You need to know what a does, what p does, and what q does. So in the hyperbola, if a is positive, let's say these are your asymptotes. If a is positive, it's gonna be in the first quadrant and in the third quadrant. You have to memorize that. So whenever a is positive, it's always in the first and the third quadrant. And then if a is negative, it's gonna be in the second and in the fourth quadrant, always. So whenever a is positive, it's always in the first and third quadrant. If it's negative, it's always in the second quadrant and in the fourth quadrant. So you have to memorize the shape. All right, here is an example. Let's say we are asked to draw this hyperbola. So for us to draw it, we need the x-intercept. So whenever we draw a hyperbola, we need the x-intercept and the asymptote and the y-intercept as well. So we always need the asymptote, the x-intercept, and the y-intercept. So these three are what is important for us to draw the asymptote. And I mean to draw the hyperbola. And the hyperbola is the easiest part of functions. It's easy to get total when you are given a hyperbola. So let's deal with the word asymptote. So an asymptote is a line where the graph will keep on approaching, but it will never touch. So even if I extend it by far, it will keep on getting closer and closer to the asymptote, but it will never touch. So that is an asymptote, a line that the graph keeps on approaching, but never gets to touch it. So a hyperbola has got two asymptotes. We've got the vertical asymptote and the horizontal asymptote. Hence, if a is positive, the shape of it will be like this. Notice it gets closer and closer to the asymptote but never touches. Also here it gets closer but never touches. This side as well and this side. It will keep on getting closer and closer but it will never touch. Same thing there. Just before I continue, if you want to be tutored, either online or physically, online it doesn't matter where you are or which country you are at, you can still be tutored. So we offer cheap online lessons, and if you want to be tutored physically, we can still make an arrangement. So call or WhatsApp this number, but preferably please WhatsApp this number, and then we will take it from there. So what I do is that I tutor people 5 days a week online, and I give tests once a week so that I can check your improvement. So when you draw your hyperbola, first of all, start with asymptote. The funny part is that here it's 1, but whenever you see something here, you contradict it on the graph. So if here it's positive 1, in the graph it will be negative 1. So it will be negative 1 on the graph. If it was maybe negative 2 on the graph, it will be positive 2. So this one contradicts, but this one remains the same. So this one, it's at negative 1. That's your vertical asymptote. And then this one is your horizontal asymptote. So your horizontal asymptote, you don't contradict, it's at negative 2. So where negative 2 is, that's where we'll draw it. So that's our asymptote. Then let's find our x and y intercept. So x-intercept, y is equals to 0. This should always be stated. So x-intercept, y is equals to 0. So we'll make y 0, and then we will solve for x. So we take this to the other side, it's going to be 2, and then we're going to have that. So whenever you have a fraction, for instance, if we have maybe x, let's just say 2 over x is equals to, let's say 5 over 4. What you do is that you cross multiply. You will say x times 5, which is 5x, and then 2 times 4, which is 8. And then you continue solving. So we just cross multiply. So that's basically the same thing we're going to do here. This is just the same as over 1. So then when you multiply this stuff, it's going to become 2 times x plus 1. Notice it's 2 multiplied by this whole x plus 1. So that's why it has to be in brackets. So it's 2 multiplied by x plus 1. And then we're going to have 1 times 2, which is 2, so equals to 2. And then when we distribute, we're going to have 2x plus 2 equals to 2. When we take this to the other side, it's going to be 0. Whoa, it's gonna be 0, yep. And then it means 2x is equals to 0, therefore x is equals to 0. So since our x is equals to 0, we don't need to calculate our y-intercept. You'll get 0 still. We can just calculate it for fun, but there's no need. But I'm gonna calculate it. So our x-intercept is 0, so it means it's 0 and 0. So it's at the origin, 0 and 0. We've already found our y-intercept, but it's fine. Let's just calculate just for fun. So now we're gonna say our y-intercept x is equals to 0. So if I make a0, x0 is gonna be 2 over 0 plus 1 minus 2. And 2 over 0 plus 1, 0 plus 1 is 1, so it's just gonna be 2 over 1. 2 over 1 is 2, so then we have 2 minus 2, therefore y is equals to 0. Same thing, it's still this coordinate. There was no need to calculate it. So whenever you get 0 as your x-intercept, you don't need to calculate your y. So the situation is very simple. When we look at this stuff, we know the graph is going to pass here, right? So we've got our x and y intercept and also our asymptotes. Those were what is important. So we know that a is positive. If a is positive, it's going to be in the first quadrant and in the third quadrant, not of the Cartesian plane, but of the asymptote. It doesn't respect the Cartesian plane, it respects the asymptote. So if it was negative, it would have been on the second and on the... So let's just say it was negative. If it was, let's say, negative, it would have literally been on the second and on the fourth quadrant, right? It doesn't respect, not of the Cartesian plane, but of the asymptote. So it respects the asymptote, not the Cartesian plane. So because it's positive, it has to be on the first and third quadrant. But notice it must pass through this point. So we'll draw it in this way. First quadrant and in the third quadrant. So that's what we have. So it's in the first quadrant and in the third quadrant. If you like this video, please subscribe to my channel and like the video as well, so that you can get more of these kind of videos.